Thank you, Lila. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today. I'm Tamara Brownfield, President and Principal Consultant of Atlas Compensation Partners. And with my nearly 20 years of experience, I have worked in all areas of comp, spanning across industries such as financial, manufacturing, chemical, technology, education, and software. And I've had the opportunity over my career to design and implement compensation philosophies, global banding and salary structures, global incentive plans, executive comp structures and programs, and global reward and recognition programs. So I certainly hope you will find the following presentation helpful as we review the changes to the FLSA overtime rules. So today I'm just going to go over some background information and what led to the revision, a summary of the final overtime rule and what has changed, employer compliance and considerations and what you need to do as an employer to come into compliance. And I've included two items that will be helpful in the appendix as you navigate toward compliance with the new rule. So some background information. The rule was revised per a directive by President Obama to update and modernize the FLSA minimum wage and overtime pay protections. The proposed rule was published in June of 2015, and as you all know, the final rule was released just recently in May of 2016, with compliance required by December 1st of 2016. And really the biggest impact is that the final rule updates the salary level requirement for exemption, which is known as the standard salary threshold. So with the new rule, the standard salary threshold has been updated to $47,476 per year, which is $913 per week. That is the 40th percentile of weekly earnings for full-time salaried workers in the lowest wage census region, which is currently the South. The highly compensated employees threshold is set at the 90th percentile of full-time salaried workers nationally. So for HCEs, it's determined on a national basis. For the standard salary level threshold, it's determined from the lowest wage census region. And the HCE salary threshold is at 134,004. That is the updated number. Employers may apply non-discretionary bonuses and incentive payments, such as commissions, up to 10% or $4,747 of the standard threshold level. Payments must be made on at least a quarterly basis. So any annual bonus, annual incentive plans, those are not eligible to be taken into consideration. Lila, it looks like, I'm not sure people can see the slides.
Oh, it looks like you might have to just unpause your screen there, Tamara. There you go.
Sorry about that, everybody. I just jumped right in.
Yeah, I also uploaded the slides to the handout section too, so you guys will have that if you want to follow along too. So it'll be in the section.
Okay. Sorry about that. Here, I'll just go through, show you quickly the slides that I've just been through. You can take a quick look before I go on to the next slide. Thank you for pointing that out. So no changes with the new rule were made to the duties tests. And I just want to point out there were some exceptions to the standard salary thresholds. American Samoa, the motion picture industry, and computer professionals. So if there continue to be some updates on these exceptions, those will all be available on the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division website. For example, right now, Puerto Rico is under the standard salary threshold of the $913 per week, but that one is currently being reviewed. So if there's any change on that, that'll be updated onto the DOL website. So January 1st of 2020 will be the effective date of the first update to those salary threshold levels. Then they will be updated every 3 years based on the same criteria. For the standard salary threshold, again, tied to the 40th percentile for the lowest wage region at that time. And then for highly compensated employees, the salary threshold will be tied to that 90th percentile of workers nationally. Now, the Department of Labor will post those new salary levels 150 days in advance of their effective date. So for the first update, August 1st, 2019, the new thresholds will be posted for compliance by January 1st of 2020. Now this next slide, this is based on actually a chart that is available on the DOL website. This has a little bit more information, but I just wanted to pull out some of the main items that are changing. This is a nice summary to have to reference, and you can share with your teams, but it has each of the main components, what the current rule is, and what the final rule is that requires compliance by December 1st of this year. Now, I also included the link to the wage and hour division of the DOL. That is actually a really great resource. The fact sheet for the new rule is posted there, as well as all the fact sheets for all of the different duties tests. So if you have specific questions on specific exemption and duties tests for roles, I really recommend that you check out that website, keep that as a resource, and really use those fact sheets because they have great summaries of the duties tests and exemptions. And you don't have to try to go through the cumbersome regulation, hundreds and hundreds of pages. They're very nice summaries of duties tests for sure. And they're available on there. They're just called fact sheets, and that'll take you to a whole list of those. So again, you as an employer have until December 1st of 2016 to come into compliance with these new threshold levels. So really the steps to take, you want to identify all your exempt employees that are below the 47,476 threshold and highly comped employees below the 134,004. I've included a sample worksheet, and I'll show that to you in the appendix here in just a second. You want to determine your action and what makes sense for your organization, and I'll show you some alternatives I've put together in a table in the appendix. Of course, review budget, see how it works with your budget, and also you'll want to review with HR and payroll systems to see what types of implications, what types of changes you may need to make to comply with the new regulation. Training if needed for individuals who may be newly non-exempt, understanding how they would record their time worked, and the rules around overtime, time worked, time not allowed to work, and specific internal policies. And then, of course, the most important piece, communication. Manager communications, employee communications. You'll want to determine who's going to communicate to those affected employees. Is it going to be just the manager, a combination manager and human resources? So you want to determine that and make sure you have those appropriate communications, because that's going to be the key to the success of the implementation of these new changes. A few items to consider as you're navigating through this. If a newly non-exempt role has exempt duties, are you going to move the duties to another role or let them remain in the current role? Pay compression. If moving compensation to the new standard salary threshold will bump into the next level or even to a supervisory role. So that could end up being, especially if it's bumping into some of those next levels that are supervisors. You will definitely want to review salary ranges for exempt jobs. You may need to make some adjustments for those exempt jobs that have minimums below the standard threshold. And also address the potential of having exempt and non-exempt employees in the same role. Is this okay, something that you'll be okay with in your organization? I personally am not a proponent of that, but it may not be possible within your org to move everybody all at once. So it may just be something that does take some time while this new rule is going into effect. And all of these, of course, all these considerations really do compensation philosophy, your organization's overall comp philosophy, values, and culture, and what makes sense for your organization. So here's just some sample data points that will help you conduct your analysis. You'll want to include all current exempt employees below the 47,476 threshold. Populate an Excel spreadsheet with all of this information, and then you can add in some calculations and formulas to calculate the current weekly salary rate and determine the amount below the new threshold. The weekly salary rate after reclassification or salary change, potential impacts of overtime paid if moving from exempt to non-exempt. So this will overall be able to help you understand the dollar in your organization and which employees are affected. And of course, help you to make those decisions of exactly what you want to do with some of the individuals who are affected or potentially affected. And just some alternatives. These are not all inclusive, but on the left are alternatives that would result in increased labor costs. So if your company is able to increase labor costs, some of the alternatives are adjusting the salaries up to the new standard threshold level. That sounds very easy, but it can be a large impact to budgets. Reclassify to non-exempt without pay reduction or a decrease in hours, and reclassify to non-exempt without pay reduction, but limit the hours per week to 40 and add staff to then offset some of that lost productivity. And on the right column, alternatives resulting in no change to labor costs. So reclassifying to non-exempt without pay reduction, limit the hours per week to 40, but do not add additional staff. Reclassify to non-exempt, reduce pay to offset overtime, adjust those salaries up to maintain exemption, but potentially cut staff to offset costs, and reduce or eliminate the bonus and incentive eligibility to offset costs. And just remember that in addition to meeting the standard salary threshold, for a job to be classified as exempt, it does have to also meet those requirements of the exempt duties test. And again, out on the DOL website, Wage and Hour Division, all those fact sheets can help definitely identify those specific duties. And as I said, this is not all inclusive. You may be able to do one. You may want to do a combination of alternatives, but it's really what's going to work for your organization, both from a culture and budget perspective. I was thinking that I would allow some time for questions. I imagine there would be a lot of questions, but I'm not seeing any questions. Do you see any, Lila? Am I missing them?
No, I'm not seeing any yet either. Oh, just one came in. So I'm seeing that now. So feel free to ask away. But I do see one in there, Tamara, if you see that as well.
I'm interested in specifically how the new highly comped employee threshold affects who's exempt and who's non-exempt. So for the highly comped piece, for individuals whose salary is now $134,004, they would automatically be categorized as exempt. That, of course, is salary, but does not include if that individual is currently non-exempt, and it would not include additional overtime hours that gets them to that, or an annual bonus that gets them to that. That would truly be their actual annual salary. So if the individual is at the 134,004, that is an automatic exemption. What about cell phone use? I'm assuming that question is about individuals on call, potentially. Actually, I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to skip that one for now. I think that might be what that's about, but if you want to clarify that, and I'll answer your question in later on down the line. What is the definition of highly compensated employee? Highly compensated employee, they would fall into that category. Right now, it's if their salary is $100,000 or more, and with the new regulation, they would have to be at that 134,004. A lot of questions around highly compensated. How do you view this to affect unlimited PTO policies if employees are moved to hourly non-exempt? Well, it absolutely can, and it all depends on your organization and if there are different types of policies in place for exempt and non-exempt. But that is definitely a consideration you will have to look at within your organization as you navigate through making these changes. Absolutely. If we pay quarterly performance bonuses, not commission, based on management discretion, those are not counted towards the 47,476 minimum, correct? Correct. If they are based on management discretion, even though they're paid quarterly, those would not be applicable to be eligible to be considered. So they have to be truly non-discretionary, based on a commission plan or a gain sharing plan, for example. How do we compensate those that are now hourly? I'm not sure about that question. If you could expand on that, and I will answer that later on down the list. Can you please dive deeper into the rule about 10% can come from non-discretionary bonuses? Absolutely. So that 10%, which is the 4747, so it would come from and be added on to the base salary from commissions, incentive plans, anything that is based on a true calculation and not a discretionary management bonus. So for example, if an individual is on some type of incentive plan where specific revenue goals, for example, commission plans are calculated quarterly. If they are currently non-exempt at, let's say, $45,000 a year, and they're making commissions that are about $4,500 per year, paid on a quarterly basis, that would take them over the threshold to about $49,500. So that would take them over the threshold. Now, you can actually have a quarter look back. So, for example, if that individual did not make a specific performance revenue, whatever the goal is, but a calculated performance goal, if they did not make that in Q2, but they made it up in Q3, you can have that one quarter look back and include that so they maintain their exempt status. But the DOL right now is allowing no more than one quarter look back on that. But again, that that 10% up to that 4747 can only come from specific calculated quarterly bonuses. They have to absolutely be non-discretionary. And it's also important to have those plans documented. So if there were any type of audit from the DOL, that you would have the information that shows that these truly are calculated bonuses. Commission. Do all private companies with more than 50 employees who have locations in the, yes, pretty much. Pretty much. If there are any exceptions, they will be listed on those fact sheets, but pretty much everybody is responsible, whether they're nonprofit, for-profit. Everybody is subject to the new regulations. For newly non-exempt employees that need to travel, how much of their travel time do I need to travel? You know what? Let me check on that one, and I can get back to you on that question. And Liza will send out any unanswered questions that I need to get back to. She will send those out as a follow-up. So let me check on the travel. Oh, if below the 134,004 and meets the duties test, is there any change needed? No. No, if they meet the duties test, you would keep them as the exempt employee. I'm sorry, I did not understand that question at the beginning. This was probably part of another question, or other benefits that previously were only offered to non-exempt employees. Yeah, I mean, that absolutely, your organization will need to completely review if you had different policies and benefits offered to exempt versus non-exempt, and you'll have to review those for sure and determine what actions you want to take going forward. And it does, again, depends on, of course, budgets, your philosophies, values, et cetera, within your company, but absolutely all those pieces do need to be reviewed as well. Is there a formal process to identifying affected employees? Or is this just a matter of making sure to be compliant internally for that December date? There is not a formal process. I'm assuming that question means, will the DOL be looking at this? There will not be a formal process, but all employers are required to be in compliance by December 1st. I imagine that possibly in the future, looking at EEO-1 filings, for example, you know, they may be taking more of a look at these and possibly doing some compliance reviews, but that's only my opinion. But right now, it's just internally to assure that you're meeting those. And especially, you know, this regulation and the new rules, it's been a pretty popular topic, and a lot of people are very aware of it. And to also avoid any type of employee complaints going out to, you know, filing on EEOC or any of those with the DOL, definitely it's important to become compliant by that date. Do you recommend any particular sources, resources for best practices in communicating this change to employees? Sample size or discussion points. You know, I don't have anything available right now on the communication piece. But I can certainly reach out to some of my colleagues, and if I do come up with anything, I'll also send those along as a follow-up, because that's going to be a very important piece to assuring this is successfully implemented within your organization. So let me also see if I can find anything that may be helpful, some sample conversations. If they are at 75,000 annually are considered highly compensated? No. Highly compensated employees will need to meet that 134,004 threshold to be considered highly comped. As far as this regulation is concerned. If you have other programs, internal programs that you consider highly comped at a different level, that's purely an internal policy that is driving some internal actions, which is fine, but specific to this regulation, it does have to meet that 134,004. I have team members that respond to emails and cell calls away from work. These calls are work-related. Yes, you do have to count that time as either within, if they're non-exempt, you have to count that time as part of their working hours. So either as regular hours or eligible for overtime. Seasonal employees below the threshold that are on a call basis. What if they work more than 8 hours a day or more than 40 hours a week? So there are a couple of things. With part-time employees, they have to meet that 476 to be considered exempt if they meet the exemption duties. So, for example, if somebody is making their annual rate is 80,000, but and they're an exempt employee, but they're only working half time, and they're only making now $40,000. They will have to be classified as non-exempt. I thought that was a different part of the rule that at first to me didn't make sense, but for somebody who is working on a part-time basis. Now, seasonal employees are a little bit different. Of course, if they're working more than 8 hours a day or more than 40 hours a week, they should be eligible for overtime if they are in a non-exempt role, even though they're seasonal. But the part-time piece, which is a piece I forgot to bring up earlier, that is also going to be a consideration when you're looking at your workforce and determining these threshold levels. How will one determine overtime work if a company doesn't track employees' time worked? I'm assuming this is for the calculation to estimate the impact, and it's really speaking with the manager or the employees, just getting an idea of how much time they might work overtime and doing your estimation on that. It is a little bit harder to do that calculation, but at least it'll give you some type of estimate. Now, if they do become non-exempt, there should be a process in place to track that, to track their hours and assure you're in compliance and paying the correct overtime. It's my understanding that an exempt employee who is part-time, oh, I just went through that one. Yeah, my mouse is jumping around here. If employees making below the standard threshold are non-exempt, and those making the highly comp salary are automatically exempt, what does it mean for those making between the 47 and the 134? They have to meet the duties test. So if they meet the standard salary threshold and they're not at the HCE, they absolutely, to be exempt employees, they have to meet their duties test. Also, what if employees need to work after hours in order to work with customers in different time zones? Does that mean we would lower their hourly pay, or would they get overtime pay, or is this up to our discretion? Again, that would be somewhat up to the company's discretion and how they want to handle it. If you're alternating hours, so they're starting later but working later to cover those hours, then that would be considered, if they're only working those 8 hours, then they're in their standard work week. And again, if again, does this mean we would lower their hourly pay? I mean, that's where you need to look at those alternatives and look at what your company can afford. Either you're lowering their pay or you are decreasing their hours, making sure they don't work more than 40 hours. So if you take a look at the alternative slide and then do some of the calculations, so you can look at what is affordable for your company and what works with the culture. So that piece would be up to you. We have a lot of working managers who work physical labor. Would they qualify as exempt? You would really have to review their role and how it fits with the duties test. What are they doing? What is their main role? If, for example, they're managers in IT who are responsible for performance and pay decisions for employees, and but they're also part of the time they'll pitch in and help unpack computers, set up computers, doing that type of physical labor, then they would still meet the exemption. But you would definitely have to look at the role in the job description and see how it meets that specific duties test. I was looking at the DOL site the other day, but had a hard time finding info on rules for sales staff. Yeah, and actually there is a whole section, a whole fact sheet on sales employees. You actually have to go to the wage and hour division, so hopefully that link that I supplied will help. And then you'll be able to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the site and see fact sheets, and that'll take you to all of the exemption duties tests. And there's a very descriptive fact sheet on sales employees. That one. Oh, my follow-up question to, so this is one from the paying the quarterly bonuses. What if the bonus doesn't put them over 47,000, the threshold 47,476 in one quarter? Are we switching these employees back and forth depending on each quarter? I think I did possibly answer part of that. No, you're not switching it back. It's really based on 10%, that full 10% number. And as I said, you can do the look back for one quarter. But now, if they are not going to meet that, if they're not trending to meet that within the year, then they would be considered non-exempt. But you're not switching them back. You can look at it after the whole annual basis before you make that decision. But you don't want to be, of course, switching these employees back and forth each quarter, exempt to non-exempt. But you would look at their potential on that non-discretional quarterly bonus, and that would be a piece or a way to make your decision, and then just monitor throughout the year to assure that they are making that threshold for the year. And of course, make sure you keep documentation in those situations, because if an audit does come up, you want to make sure that there's documentation. Oh, sorry. Can you read the entire question so we know what you're answering? Sorry about that. Do all non-exempt positions need to be paid hourly now, or can we pay salary? And then if they, same dollars for 30 hours as for 40 hours, and then if they go over 40 hours, they earn the overtime. Absolutely, you can still have salaried non-exempt positions where they receive that standard amount every paycheck, however you calculate that, and then they are eligible. They keep their overtime hours, and you include that. So absolutely, you can still have salaried non-exempt rather than hourly non-exempt. Are you subject even if you have less than 50 employees? Yes. Yes, you still are. My question is about after-hours work. My site uses a time clock. How should I track calls and after-site emails for pay? Yeah, if you don't have a type, if they aren't able to clock in after hours, if it's a specific time clock, it's probably best to put some type of template together, and it might have to be a manual process. It just depends how large your organization is, or if you do have some type of way to update your HR systems, if you have an HR system in place, but it absolutely can be a little bit cumbersome if you don't have anything else that you're able to use other than other than a manual tracking sheet for those after-hour calls and site emails. Lila, I don't know how many more questions you want me to answer now, or if I should start kind of just jotting these down to send back out.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. It's reaching close to the end of the time here, so I'm happy to compile all these questions and then send them along to Tamara, and she can kind of follow up here. And you'll also have a follow-up recording too in Tamara's contact information. I know she has a slide about that. So, but I will definitely get these over, and she can follow up and answer them for you, since I know there's an overwhelming amount of questions actually that I don't think she'll be able to get to in this time. So we figured there'd be a lot of questions. So I really appreciate everyone's interest and responses, and we'll definitely get back to you. I have them all here, so feel free to keep punching them in. Even as we're going along and wrapping up here, and I will get them out to Tamara, and she'll get an email back, and we'll follow up. But I really appreciate everyone participating today. I know it's a big change and a lot of new rules. My head is kind of spinning, so I appreciate Tamara, you taking the time to help out and answer some of the sort of tough questions here. And like I said, we'll make sure that everyone gets a follow up, and that we kind of close the loop here, so that no one's left in the dark. And if you do need a lot of help, Tamara is also someone that can help out, on a consultative basis. So definitely, I will include her contact information in the follow-up email. So if you do want to reach out to her, she can offer this as a service. So feel free to contact her, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Tamara. Everyone, you have a great day, and I'll follow up with you soon.